Man, I have some awesome stuff to show you in this video, my friends. This is an update to the whole topic of the Great Pyramid discovery. So many new things to talk about in this video, brand new stuff. We have, of course, first, the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know if you heard about this. Of course, this was something that came out around the exact same time. I thought it was unrelated, but now the more I look into it, it is indeed related. And actually, I'm going to get into some stuff I didn't get into in my other video, actually right off the bat even, with regards to that, and how the Ark of the Covenant is the exact correct size to fit into the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid where all the energy was concentrated. Why is it the exact same size? It's also interesting that you couldn't touch the Ark of the Covenant without something happening. Very strange. And of course, so much more than that. We have, of course, what happened was some documents came out at around the same time this Great Pyramid discovery came out of the Ark of the Covenant, and apparently some documents that show that our government was looking into where it was located using remote viewing. And apparently, according to these documents, they found it, and it describes the area, and it sounds very much like it could be the Great Pyramid area. It could be a few different areas because it doesn't tell you exactly. It says the Middle East. It says they're all dressed in white, speaking Arabic, which could easily be Saudi Arabia, could be Egypt, because they do dress in white in Egypt as well. So it's, you don't know exactly where it is, but we have some interesting history to get into with regards to that. We got the Pillar of Enoch, which is a name that was, well, technically it was called the Pillar and the Altar in Isaiah chapter 19. It's talking about the Great Pyramid because it's the only structure that meets the riddle mentioned in Isaiah 19, which I'll show you that also in this video. We're going to get into these scientists, where some scientists were saying that this Doppler radar, it's not possible that it could see these things. It's underneath the ground. And then there's other scientists saying, no, actually it could, because you're not understanding the technology and what they're doing. So we'll get into that as well. And actually, we're going to get into a ton of stuff as we get into this video. First of all, I got to mention food supply, 25-year shelf life. We got to get this out of the way. Link is in the description for that. If you've not already bought this, you might want to get this. All right. Link is in the description for it. The fact is, you never know what's next, my friends. We have all these different, they have tons of options. Check out all these options available. Link is in the description for this. So many different options available for you to choose from. Also, this book here, The Lost Ways, how your great-great-grandfather lived without electricity, had a bit of cellar, do things around the house like they did in the good old days, hundreds of pages illustrated. You're going to definitely need that. Before something happens, you've seen what's happened in the last few years. It's wise to be prepared. Link is in the description. Also, go check out my social media. GR videos, I just updated it yesterday night, or yesterday. Link is in the description for that. Lots of deep dives into interesting topics. Let's get back to the video. So, of course, we have this new discovery, and I was playing clips from this Sunday Cool channel talking about this Ark of the Covenant. We'll play that in a little bit. First, I want to show you this document. So here's the document right here. Let's see if I can get it on the screen better. There we go. Here we go. So this is project, what it says here, Sunstreak. Training target 0209 is the Ark of the Covenant. Viewer 032 attained excellent site contact, doing very well with stage 4 structure. Viewer also exhibits the ability to keep AOL to a minimum. I don't know what that means, but have to be careful with editing, though. This does not seem to be a problem at this time, just something to watch for. And it goes into some rather curious details about what he saw while looking at the Ark of the Covenant. Some of these guys have a very good track record of finding things like this. I think this man here had at least a 50-50 track record of just randomly knowing where stuff was. They just ask him a question, and he could literally tell you where it was at in the world. And he had a 50-50 is pretty good, okay? Especially considering most people just guessing where something might be that is no one knows where it is. They're going to never get it right. You know what I mean? 50-50 is pretty good. So it's kind of interesting. So we're going to get into that, but I wanted to show you this. Where was it at? Okay, so we have right here. So this is really interesting. We have this article here, Great Pyramid in the Ark of the Covenant. The word ark comes from the Hebrew word aron, which means a chest or box. Its dimensions are described as 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits, or 45 inches by 27 inches by 27. Curiously, this is the exact volume of the stone chest coffer in the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid of Egypt. This coffer was the only object within the king's chamber, as the ark was a single sacred object within the Holy of Holies in the temple. Also, the laver or basin that the priests used to wash their feet had the identical cubit dimension. So what is the chance that the Ark of the Covenant would have the exact same dimensions as the inside of this stone chest in the king's chamber? That's just a weird coincidence, or there's some more to it. So that's something a lot of people pointed out. Also, it had some sort of protection on it, or charge or something on this Ark of the Covenant, which of course, as we discussed in my previous video, actually it had been on my other, well, it had been on this channel too, I think, where I talked about how we actually have lots of evidence that the Great Pyramid was there to create energy and actually focus it upwards, kind of like a Tesla tower, with the top of the pinnacle of the Great Pyramid being made of gold, which is exactly what would be needed. And I don't want to go through that whole thing, but we actually explained how there's actual evidence in the different chambers going into inside the pyramid, showing the right chemical traces, or whatever you want to call it, for what would be needed to essentially cause this whole process to happen. And go check out my other video if you want to look into that. So theoretically, these large structures that were discovered underneath the Great Pyramid would be potentially water. These columns would have water in them, also copper and iron as part of the process for generating this energy. This energy being focused on the king's chamber. Could the Ark of the Covenant have been in it? Had been somehow, in a sense, charged by it? I don't know. The materials of the Ark of the Covenant are rather interesting and seem to be something that could retain energy. And some say also it may not have just been physical energy, but also something spiritual going on here as well. The fact that it's called the pillar and also an altar in Isaiah 19, which I should show you that now. It talks about, in that day there shall be, this is Isaiah 19, verse 19. In that day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst, or in the middle of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof. This is, of course, first I need to explain this. This is describing the same thing twice. This is a very common style in Scripture, where it'll describe something and then it'll describe it again a different way. So it says here, it's an altar in the middle of the Egypt, but at the same time, it's also a pillar at the border of Egypt. So how can it be in the middle and at the border? It's sort of a riddle, right? It's a pillar and it's an altar. Well, this does look like a pillar, the way it's shaped there. And could it be an altar? Could it be sacred? It is the only object that actually meets the requirements for this, being in the middle and also being at the edge. And let me show you that. All right, here we go. This explains it out right here. The location of the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid of Giza is located at the border of the Upper and Lower Egypt. That would be on the border, which is also in the center of Egypt. So this is how the riddle is described. And that is exactly where it's located, meaning that this is identified in Isaiah as an altar and a pillar. So that could be related to the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know, perhaps, maybe. It seems very interesting. I mean, the dimensions are the right size and everything as well. Very interesting, of course. We have some interesting clips to play on this as well. So I already showed you this document here, Project Sunstreak. It shows here basically what happened. Initially, sort of tells you the summation of what's going on here. And I already read this. Attained excellent site contact. He's essentially looking remote viewing for the Ark of the Covenant. Now, let's read it. Let's go through this clip here where he talks about what they discovered. Okay, check this out.
On December 5th, 1988, this one man, for his training exercise, was to find the Ark of the Covenant. And what he wrote was bone-chilling. What he saw.
Antarctica.
Okay, no.
Darn.
Pyramids.
I'm just going to read what he said.
Yeah.
It's not that long.
Directly from .gov.
Yeah.
Debrief.
Or his...
Okay, let's get it to the right section where he talks about this. Yeah, here it is. Okay, let's play this.
About the Ark of the Covenant. Target is in a container. This container has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to AOL, which I don't know what that means, a coffin, and is decorated with seraphim. See sketch, page 16.
So they're just...
So first, I didn't even notice that the first time. So it's in a box that has seraphim on it. So this was clearly locked away. So this Ark of the Covenant's locked in another box with seraphim on it, perhaps locked up by God. And it's interesting because there are beings protecting it. And it has some sort of machinery on the box so that if you try to open it with like a pry bar, it's kind of like Indiana Jones. It's got little booby traps and stuff on it, all right? It's kind of like that.
Describing it.
Yeah,
Got it.
He's viewing it. The target is located somewhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seem to be Arabic. Visuals...
Okay, and then he goes into and he talks about how they're dressed in white. It's some Arabic country. Let's see here. Then let's see. Let's get over to the part where he's talking about. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Check this out. He's going to describe where it's at.
The target is hidden underground. Dark and wet were all aspects of the location of the target. The
Okay, so dark and wet. That could easily be underneath the Great Pyramid. That's one potential.
purpose of the target is to bring people together. See page 16. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, and the resurrection.
What?
There is an aspect of spirituality, information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we know.
So this is interesting. So obviously there's been said with regards to underneath this Great Pyramid, these chambers, and we actually have historical references to this as well. This is not just something that recently, someone just, he said that these radars saw this. And no, this is something that they've talked about throughout history, that there are chambers. As a matter of fact, back in 1930, I was going to pull that up. I didn't even have that. There's a video talking, actually, I think I have it here, talking about 1930, and I think James has it. Here we go. He plays it. I can't remember which one it is, though. I think it's this one. Let's see if it's this one here. So, yeah, I think this is the one here. So, basically, what happened was back in 1930, there were some archaeologists that discovered large cavernous rooms underneath the Great Pyramid, very, very large ones. And then that was put in newspapers and things like that for a little while. And then all of a sudden, they just stopped doing it. And after that, you didn't hear anything else ever about it again. That was almost 100 years ago at this point. I think this might be the part here.
Launched an excavation project around the Sphinx, where they started to drill beneath it, but were stopped by the Egyptian army. And then guess what happened?
Okay, I think I found it. So basically, there's this guy named Zahi Hawass. So here it is. I think this is the section right here. Let's play this.
Hawass decided to do a documentary about the underground levels and secret passageways underneath the Sphinx.
In 1996, Hawass greenlights a project to investigate under the Sphinx after receiving $10 million in funding to do so. It was so big, they even released a teaser trailer for it, showing Hawass going through tunnels under the Sphinx and hyping them up, where he's quoted on record as saying, "We are now inside the Sphinx in this tunnel. This tunnel has never been opened before. No one really knows what's inside this tunnel, but we are going to open it for the first time." Video ends, and over the next few months, Hawass and his team tell the world of a series of previously unknown tunnels that exist under the Sphinx. Reports coming out of drill samples going 100 feet straight down finding red granite, something that geologists confirm does not naturally occur that deep. Ancient Egypt commonly used red granite in their buildings and statues. Could that have been one? Then, out of nowhere, Hawass just scraps the whole project without explaining what they found down there and insists there is nothing under the Sphinx.
Oh my goodness, dude. Oh, this reminds me of so many things we've looked into in the past. What am I thinking of? Well, obviously you have what happened in the Grand Canyon with the Egyptian treasure found in certain areas, which of course that part of the Grand Canyon actually has Egyptian names. We talked about that like 10 years ago on this channel. There's actually a lot of things like this. There's also a dam. Was that Hoover Dam? There's something with that. There's some story with that as well. There's so many things like this that are really interesting, where they'll say, they'll say something for a while and then they'll stop saying it, and like, oh no, that never happened. We never said that. Kind of like Antarctica. That's another one too. You get a little bit of that with Antarctica also. But so we've talked about a lot of stuff where they do this in the past. And of course it was 1930s when they had first mentioned this. That's not what this is. Obviously this isn't 1930. I think this is 1980, he said, or something. But so they were looking into some of the stuff said in the 1930s, and they were trying to do an excavation over where they said these things were, right, in the 1980s, and they were finding all these things. And then, oh, we're not allowed to do that. Stop talking about this. So I thought that was really interesting. And of course, we had this Arab historian from the 10th century writing about how they built these pyramids, how they had a what do they call it? I have it over here. Hall of Records, I think it was, underneath the Great Pyramid. I got a lot of windows open. It was the Hall of Records. But so we've heard all these stories before. We've heard all these, and we've seen people talk about all these numerous entrances and them being blocked off. Clearly, and then on top of that, we now have this, and that gets into sort of the science part where we have this, and this is interesting. I actually have some good stuff on that as well, by the way. So we saw what the scripture says. It talks about a pillar and an altar. Sounds like it could very well easily be talking about the Great Pyramid because of its location. Has sort of a riddle in the passage. It only points to the Great Pyramid because it's on the border and in the middle. Also, so now we have this scientific debate on whether or not this radar Doppler can actually penetrate the ground, because look, it can only go down several meters from what I understand with regards to penetrating, but that's not what these scientists were doing. This is where the confusion lies. So one set of scientists are saying, well, this is impossible for you to look down 1,000 meters. Well, actually, they're correct. You can't do that. But that's not what they were doing. They were looking at the ground and looking for micro movements and relating it to what's underneath the ground. So if the micro movements were different than solid ground, it would mean that there's some chambers beneath the ground. And it had something to do with using the technology to look for micro movements on the ground. So let me show you what's referring to here. So first, SAR operates via microwave reflections. It measures surface features, not deep underground chambers. Vibration-based imaging from orbit is science fiction. There's no realistic way to reconstruct kilometer deep. This is what the scientists on the side are saying, that no, this is impossible, right? There's no realistic way to reconstruct kilometers deep structures from pixel motion analysis alone. So they're saying this is not possible. Now let me play what is sort of the counter to that from the other scientists. Check this out.
But according to researcher Manu Saifzadeh, who has also been researching the science, the principles behind the science of the new study should not be dismissed, because the scientists are not claiming the radar waves are penetrating 2 kilometers of bedrock. They're looking at micro motions detected at the surface level. So, excuse the jargon, they are modelling subsurface harmonically resonating voids that are
So this is really interesting. Projected on the surface above the voids are detected as surface micromotions. The satellite only detects this motion as a surface, not resonating void itself. From these surface motions, the location and depth of any void can be reconstructed according to Manu, the guy that we were just showing on the screen. So it has to do with sort of analyzing the micro movements and being able to trajectorize how deep it is. As you can see there, they're doing it through sort of a three-dimensional positioning. So they have different positions of the satellite orbit, and they're checking the micro movements based on these three-dimensional sort of modeling of it with all these different angles. And then they're able to detect sort of where and how deep these chambers are using this. So this is what these scientists are actually claiming. So it's something measured on the surface, not down deep. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up because there's a lot of people talking about that right now. And that kind of makes sense of what's going on with that. So the question is, why would this guy all of a sudden at the end say, well, actually we didn't find, even though he showed video evidence, he shows video evidence of going into these areas underneath the Sphinx. Perhaps he had to wait to get approval to show all of it. He just showed sort of the staircase, sort of the entrance of it, going into it, and showed a little bit, but not really that much. But then maybe he had to get permission from those, obviously in the Egyptian area there, to show the rest. And perhaps he was told, no, you're not allowed to show this. Not allowed to show what's going on underneath there. And of course, then it was immediately halted after that. Of course, we have historians talking about these areas underneath the Great Pyramid for centuries. We had also this Egyptian Arab historian, or actually Arab historian, the 10th century Abul Hassan al-Masudi wrote about the pyramid's construction. Of course, he was obviously writing from other historical works that he had referenced, mentioning something about magic papyrus included, inscribed with symbols under each massive block and then struck with the stone with the metal rod to initiate levitation. So it was some sort of acoustic vibrational frequencies or something that had to do with its movement, some sort of technology. Of course, any sort of technology like that would seem like magic to us. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Of course, if you took somebody from 1,000 years ago and put them in America in 2025, showed them my video on YouTube, you're like, where's the person at? In this device, right? So they would see it as magic. And in reality, science is, of course, a form of magic. Art is also. And a lot of people don't understand this because they've separated science and religion in society. So you think they're two separate entities or two separate things, when actually they're connected. And maybe it was intentional that they separated it so that you would never be able to understand things fully. That things that are considered magic may actually be a form of science in this creative world we live in. And so that's something interesting. Obviously, you got this pillar, as I mentioned, it's an altar and a pillar in the midst of Egypt, clearly referring to the Great Pyramid. Some call it the Pillar of Enoch. And it is interesting how it fits the exact same size. Also, the Ark of the Covenant had some sort of charge on it. And it appears the Great Pyramid would have focused energy into the king's chamber. So it's like, it seems way too coincidental. Here we have people in Quora. That's how you say it, Quora.com. Is it possible that Moses actually took the Ark of the Covenant from inside the Great Pyramid of Giza? And of course, they say that a lot of people that are looking into this say that the Great Pyramid is actually 10,000 years old. So could it have been created before the fall, of man? A lot of people think that we're living, like if you go look on Google or any search engine for that matter, what's the Hebrew calendar to tell you that we live in like 5083 or something like that. 5783, I mean. And if you actually look at what historians said 2,000, 3,000 years ago, no, actually we live in 7,533. And that's at the fall. So before the fall, could there have been thousands of years of peace and harmony on Earth? Perhaps the Great Pyramid was built back then in the shape, potentially, of New Jerusalem that is described in Revelation. Because a lot of people assume it's a cube, but there is some evidence that it could be a pyramid. Perhaps this is modeled in the shape of New Jerusalem. Something a lot of people may have never heard of. That's another thing that this could also relate to. This thing could actually indeed originally be something that was created at the beginning of time. I don't know. I'm just postulating. Who knows? It is interesting, though. Some of the dimensions, I've seen a lot of these breakdowns of the Great Pyramid's dimensions and how well it relates to things in Scripture. And I just mentioned the Ark of the Covenant's one. There's websites I've seen. I don't have it in front of me, but I've seen ones before where they just have like these ridiculous breakdown of so many things at the Great Pyramid that relate to things in Scripture, dimensional wise. And of course, the way it was built looks way too advanced for primitive man to build it. It's very obvious. And of course, you also had these encasement stones that were on the outside of the Great Pyramid. They were removed during the Middle Ages, approximately. And you can see kind of how it would have looked here with the gold piece on top, which would allow the energy to flow upward, kind of like a Tesla tower. You could see some of these encasement stones right here. This thing would have been white. From a long distance, it would have probably been very bright to look at. It's kind of interesting, of course, looking into all this. Of course, there's also some say that, there's some connections between Jerusalem and Sinai in Galatians 4, which sort of would indicate maybe New Jerusalem could be the shape of a mountain. And again, the Great Pyramid has also in it stone similar to how mountains are. And this comes back to how electrical charge would flow upward through granite and other rock. And this again relates to the whole thing about it being an energy generator. And that's as you can see here, with these harmonic stones right here, which I talked about in the previous video. They've shown that there's actually, you can focus electromagnetic energy on the Great Pyramid and it will actually resonate with it. You have, of course, these harmonic stones. These were discovered with this recent find right here. These things right here are all harmonically built to the natural frequency of the rocks within the pyramid, so that when they resonate, they're actually causing sort of the resonation to increase and get larger and larger. Kind of like if you were going the speed of sound in a jet and you stayed the speed of sound, eventually your jet's going to fall apart because the sound waves get bigger and bigger. It's kind of like when you have an opera singer breaking a glass. She sings at the natural frequency of the glass. It's similar. That it's essentially what's going on with the Great Pyramid, allegedly, based on some of these findings and some of this research people have been doing. And so these stones actually are set up to have, when you change these stones here, it actually changes the frequency of the sound. I showed in a previous video how it relates to when you blow on a bottle like this, which you can't really do it with this kind, but a glass bottle and you make a sound, it's kind of like that. And it changes the pitch of the sound with the different amount of rocks they put in here. And they actually put the frequency of this here appears to be the natural frequency of the stones in the pyramid itself, so that it would actually build up a lot of this energy inside the pyramid and then focus it upward towards that gold on top of the pyramid. And I also showed a clip in my previous video of something from 2020 where they had found one of these holes that may have been actually one of these columns. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Go check out my other video as well. Kind of wonder what some of you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.